people, for the love of community, for the love of progress. City.
Hit an all-new high. NIH Director Francis Collins now wants parents to mask up in front of their own kids inside their own homes.
So yeah, you do need to think about it, and that's the reason why the recommendations are for kids under 12 that they avoid being in places where they might get infected, which means recommendations of mask wearing in schools and at home. Parents of unvaccinated kids should be thoughtful about this, and the recommendation is to wear masks there as well.
Let me just follow up
I
on
know
that.
that's uncomfortable. I know it seems weird, but it is the best way to protect your kids.
After a full day of outrage over this positively ridiculous recommendation, Collins tried to walk his comments back, tweeting, "Let me clarify the masking message that I garbled on New Day this morning. Vaccinated parents who live in communities with high COVID transmission rates should mask when out in public indoor settings to minimize risks to their unvaccinated kids. No need to mask at home." Joining me now to react, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. Senator, thanks so much for joining me. Francis Collins is a very smart guy. He helped map the human genome, for crying out loud. But when he says things like this, how can you not just lose faith in our medical establishment to give us good advice?
How can people who are so smart say such stupid things? There is no science to defend putting your kids in masks or parents wearing masks. No science whatsoever. If there were, we would be wearing masks for years and years, because for kids, the death rate is about the same as the seasonal flu. It may be less than the seasonal flu. So is Francis Collins proposing that because the flu's with us forever, that parents should be wearing masks around their kids that have the flu? It is absolutely and utterly without scientific evidence. Now, they're all freaking out right now about the Delta variant. One thing is, in all likelihood, true. It is more transmissible, significantly more transmissible. But guess what? Every bit of evidence shows that it's less deadly, significantly less deadly. Public Health England looked at 92,000 people. If you were vaccinated and under 50, there were no deaths. If you were unvaccinated and under 50, 0.08%. Still very, very small. So it's not an argument for not getting vaccinated. It's an argument for not getting hysterical over the Delta variant. We shouldn't be changing any mandates. And really, in all likelihood, the mask didn't affect the trajectory of the virus at all. The only thing that's slowing the virus down is the vaccine and natural immunity, and they continue to ignore natural immunity, so they think we're too far behind. We got to vaccinate the children. But in reality, I think it's 90% of people over 65 have been vaccinated. That's extraordinary. We should be celebrating.
We should be celebrating.
Thank you, Senator Rand Paul.
Hysteria that I think we're experiencing
Excellent.
right now, which is leading to, unfortunately, the imposition of a number of different mandates on the way that people are living, whether it's coming from government or whether it's coming from the private sector and corporations. We're seeing these increased demands, these mandates for vaccination, including in New York City and elsewhere. It's only going to increase, from my perspective, across the country in all these different blue areas. What's the argument that you have against these types of vaccine records as requirements in order to participate essentially in normal society?
Well, I'm against the mandates because I believe in a free society. I'm pro-vaccine. In fact, some idiot reporter came up to me and says, "Are you still against the vaccines?" And I said, I still have the same position. I'm for the vaccines and freedom. But here's the thing, there's some interesting things coming up. I'm against the mandates, but even if you're going to mandate it, what if you're making a mandate that ignores the science? So there's a professor at George Mason who's got a lawsuit that's very interesting going on. He had COVID 5 months ago. He's got a positive test. He has antibodies, and they want him to be vaccinated. And he's like, "Well, I have the same immunity and all the scientific evidence, and my doctor says I don't need it." So I think that'll be an interesting lawsuit, because even in the old days when they say, "Oh, well, everybody had a passport, for smallpox," you know what the exception was? If you had visible pox, you didn't have to take the vaccine, and that was your passport to travel.
Senator, I fear, as I know that you're concerned about, that we're going to see a permanent pandemic reality in America, where all of this is used to essentially have a much more powerful role for government in all of our lives. And, if Francis Collins Collins was to be believed, the ability to go into your home and make sure that you're masking up around your kids. Is this a situation where there can be steps taken by governors and by the Congress to push back against this and ensure that we don't end up in a situation where government has a lot more control over our lives than we would like, with this as the justification?
It's about the only redeeming thing that I've seen in the last year or so. The only encouragement towards those who believe in freedom is we've had some governors pushing back. Ron DeSantis has pushed back against, vaccine passports and mask mandates. Look, if you look at all the mask mandates when they were imposed, the incidence of the disease went up. Now, I'm not saying the mask caused the disease to go up, but as you had mask mandates, you found that actually got more disease. They didn't work.
Senator Paul, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
Vast majority of vaccinated people who contract COVID-19 will suffer only mild symptoms. There is no good reason that we must again wear masks or live under lockdowns. He joins me now. So, Robbie, how bad was your situation? How bad was your breakthrough case?
I'm happy to report it was extremely mild. I lost taste and smell, and that's been taking its time to come back. And when that happened, I got a test that did confirm I had a breakthrough infection, even though I'd been vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine. But I felt better, and I really didn't even feel all that sick. I felt completely better after about a day and a half. And I absolutely credit the vaccine for helping me with that. Other than the taste and smell, I don't have any lingering symptoms whatsoever. And my experience, it's not just personal anecdote, that's the experience that the data shows most people who have breakthrough infections are having. The numbers are just so low. They're like astronomically low. You can barely see them, of people who had a really bad health outcome after being vaccinated, especially for people my age, except for the non-elderly.
Well, Robbie, the White House, though, and so many of the administration's allies are making the case across the country that these types of breakthrough experiences are justification for restoring all manner of mandates that we saw last year, and in fact, in some places, new requirements. What is your take on, and what response would you have to the politicians who are making the argument that essentially cases like yours are a justification for that?
This is completely insane. It's terrifyingly insane. They are implementing mandates. In some cases, they're suggesting things that are stricter than what we had last summer when the pandemic was out of control and we didn't have the vaccines yet. DC has reimposed an indoor mask mandate, one, by the way, that our mayor has no interest in following, even though she imposed it. She's still having parties and she's officiating a maskless wedding. It's just for you to follow, not for her. But I'm just terrified that anytime, there's a death anywhere in this country, there's a slight uptick in this disease or some other, that gives the government, we're enshrining the idea that the government has the right to come in and say everyone has to wear masks and not breathe on each other. Maybe we'll lock down some restaurants. Maybe we'll restrict their capacity. That's really scary that can happen, not just in a true emergency situation, as you can argue maybe last year was, but at any time. And it's semi-permanent, because before the mask mandates were, it was until we had the vaccine. What is it now? Now it's just until the politicians are satisfied that there's no...
It really seems to me, and we just lost Robbie there, but it really seems to me like what we really are experiencing here is something where these arbitrary rules are going to be put forward regardless of whether they actually worked or not last year, which to me is just absolutely
Unfortunately, the case, I believe.
Ought to raise skepticism
Politics.
from every American.